Hello everyone, and welcome to SoftServe's monthly webinar series. It's a great pleasure to have all of you here and joining us. So if some of you might have any issues with the sound quality or cannot hear us good, please just drop us a note into the questions and answers. So if you are trying to connect to the audio, you should just press connect using my computer. Just to let you know that all attendees are muted on the entry, so please don't worry. You will not be heard, so just drop us emails then. So you're also free to submit your questions concerning the topic of our today's webinar to the email webinar@softserveinc.com or to live chat. We'll be happy to answer them at the end of the webinar during our Q&A session. And today we'll be covering one of the most interesting and challenging topics in today's business. It's the outsourcing and how to do it right. Here with us today is Halyna Semenova, SoftServe's Engagement Director, who has seen and been on both sides of outsourcing business. Hi Halyna, how are you doing today?
Hello, Ola. I'm great, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and hello everyone who joined us today. So again, feel free to drop your questions. We'll have some Q&A time at the end of the webinar. So now we will start with going straight away in the subject of today's topic. And why I actually decided to present that is because, as Ola mentioned, I have been dealing with outsourcing in different roles for the past 10 years. I've been on vendor side, on client end, and I believe it gave me this consolidated view at the outsourcing lifecycle in general. And the major lessons learned for me over these years is that it's not technologies or solutions that fail in outsourcing. It's actually people who either can turn desperate projects into successful case studies, or they can totally fail to execute the best laid plans. And you know what, it's actually funny that the format of the webinar today, it perfectly represents the most common perception of the outsourcing. So here I am, someone who you never saw, talking just over the phone from the land far, far away, and there are some accents, there are issues with connectivity, and that's actually a lot of all those cultural fits and other soft items that you cannot put in any contract, but which can be the major reason for you to fail or for any things in the outsourcing to go wrong. So our topic today is called outsourcing being there, done that, didn't work out. So the agenda will follow the high-level life cycle of the outsourcing deal and define the most common didn't work out for me issues and the ways to overcome these challenges. And I will also talk a little bit about one of the recent projects and how we worked on the relationships between the client and the team there. First of all, let's maybe start with what should be your primary reason to turn to distributed software development. Outsourcing is no longer about the straightforward cost cutting, but it's about the extending your network of the talents and eventual co-creation. Such processes combine your vision with a partner's knowledge of what is technically possible and how you can make the use of innovation from other industries. That's why no matter how much negative connotation or even like job security threats are behind the word outsourcing, it supplies fresh ideas and challenges your existing thinking in your organization. This is the outsourcing life cycle as high level as we can talk in 20 minutes about it. And I deliberately included the very fast, this grayish breakup stage, just because for many of you, outsourcing already left some bad aftertaste in the either failed projects or lengthy explanation of the requirements or constant communication gaps. But if you are starting from the ground zero and never outsourced before, then you can just sit back, relax, and listen to other companies' failures. So recover from breakup. This stage is pretty much similar to going through the relationship breakup. you need to admit and accept that both parties did something wrong and learn from it. One of the best things to do that is actually to hold the retrospective sessions with all stakeholders in your organizations that were involved in the outsourcing exercise. Put together the list of things that went wrong, but please combine them with the things that were on your initial expectations list. And just think whether you ever voiced them to your partner. Most likely, the reasons of your failure will include the following. For example, the vendor simply didn't deliver to your expectations. When you started outsourcing, you expected to set up a self-driven engineering force, but in reality, they turned out to be just doers that required an extra oversight and explanation of every step. The thing to remember is actually, if you expect your partner's team to walk an extra mile, they should get the sufficient vision into where your company's business is going, as well as you should empower them to deliver those results. And be honest, did you ever discuss the expectations or your company plans with the vendor, or you just assume they all knew that? Another reason on the list and the reasons for failure, if you are going through the breakup stage, is most likely the culture gap. Time difference and communication barriers are the most common reasons to walk away from the offshore partner. And cultural context is the whole different topic, and I can talk, I guess, another webinar on that. That's why I will probably simply recommend you to read the great book I read recently on the cultural difference. It's called The Culture Map, and it describes very clear and specific strategies to improve your effectiveness in solving the most tricky problems caused by cross-cultural misunderstanding. The author, Erin Meyer, focuses on the 8 scales that shape collaboration with another culture, and it's a little bit another view than other authors took before. And it includes things like communication in general, and all the way up to how different countries make decisions, how they disagree between each other. An interesting thing, and maybe not that obvious, about the communication scale is that is how the author actually defines and distinguishes the cultures based on how much context is in this culture. So, for example, American and other Anglo-Saxon countries, people are trained and most subconsciously to communicate as literally and explicitly as possible. And accountability for accurate transmission is placed very firmly on the communicator. So in the American culture, if you don't understand, it's my fault. And by contrast, in many Asian cultures, including India, Japan, China, those messages are conveyed very implicitly, requiring listeners to read between the lines. And in this case, the responsibility for transmission is actually shared between the one who is sending the message and the one who is receiving that. And if you are an American from the lower context culture, you may perceive the high context communicator as if she's hiding something, and she's doing that purposely. And on the contrary, if you are from a high context culture, you might perceive your low context peer as inappropriately stating the obvious, or even as patronizing. You may think that this person is talking to you as if you're a child. And without knowing this simple difference, working across countries can become a frustrating experience and actually cause a lot of communication gaps. So truly recommend that book, very interesting and very unexpected examples. So once you're done with learning from previous experience, just move on and do everything right this time. That's why the next step on our outsourcing journey will be the finding the right partner. So the standard way to select the vendor in enterprise world is to rely on the procurement department and formal requests for information or RFPs or RFQs. So what can go wrong there? Well, traditional procurement process remains very focused on cost reduction. It treats outsourcing services supplier as an isolated third party with different goals and success criteria, which has nothing to do with the core company business. But nowadays, the organizational landscape becomes so much more complicated as new technologies and business models are introduced. In this world, the difference between core and non-core processes, those that used to be traditionally outsourced, this difference becomes less and less distinct. It means that the interdependencies between company business and supplier business becomes tighter than ever, which brings you to the fact that you should have the same goal and direction to go together with your partner. Just explain this to your procurement department and partner with them. Otherwise, if the procurement puts price above relationship in the sourcing process, you will later on find yourself in the discussion of the change requests, and most likely they will focus around, is this on the statement of work, or is it actually something that we have to do within this contract? Another great read I would recommend is this Forrester report on best practices in strategic software development partnership. And this actually states that right now we are all moving from industrial outsourcing to so-called co-creation. And here you can see the major differences between two approaches. Industrial outsourcing in this case is this traditional way to select the vendor, the supplier or service provider. The bottom line here is you should look for a partner to use continually for many projects to maximize the results. So once you made up your minds on a partner, so if not for life, then at least for longer term, it's time to engage. And one of the most common reasons for the failure of outsourcing projects is insufficient attention given to the planning phase. Even in the agile world, there is a need to think over the first steps to take once the team doubles in size or when you start a parallel development efforts across the ocean. Otherwise, your team risks to be buried with questions and extra operational issues of all sorts because they will be discovered on the go. At SoftServe, we start our new projects with so-called Smart Start workshop. We do it in client's office, and we bring together key stakeholders who will be impacted by outsourcing initiative. It's a great way to uncover the potential project challenges from the very beginning, and actually to agree what success will mean for both parties, or even like for three parties if we are talking about multi-vendor engagements. This initiation or engagement phase is also a great and perfect time to start building relationships with your new peers. No matter what engagement model you're using, even if it's a fixed bid or time and material, you're still working with new people. Get to know them better. It's very similar to managing your in-house team. Get your new team members excited with your product and plans. Ramp them up in a similar fashion as you do with your own staff. A good way is also to provide induction trainings on core values and cultural differences. Once you build the personal relationship with your contractor, it will be paid off. They will actually walk that extra mile for you. Stuff can happen, and of course the project team can forget all those good intentions when problems appear. So you might need to reinforce the partnership with some governance framework and the shared measures for project success. The major thing to remember here is please do not rely solely on performance dashboards. If your KPIs are poorly selected for whatever reason, you might get all the green statuses on the project that actually almost failed. That's why it's very important to calibrate those metrics with common sense and expert judgment, and only then to form the conclusion. Once you're agreed on the success factors, please set up regular relationship meetings, but just don't treat them as the performance review of your partner. It should be a mutual and collaborative discussion with involving the attendees that actually can bring something to the table. Just because the key to successful partnership is that you both have this agreement that each party will put the long-term relationship before opportunities to make short-term gains. And as for the incentives for your loyal partner, well, the best recognition you can give to your partner is actually rewarding them with more business. Because suppliers will go above and beyond the contracts if it helps them to win the next one. And now we can talk about the case study. Actually, one of the recent projects from my experience where we fixed the customer frustration by very basic and mostly soft methods. Here is some of the background. So we have been working with this customer for several years already, and over the time the team and the projects they had been doing got spread between more than one location. So it was several locations in the United States, in England, as well as in Eastern Europe. In one of the quarterly business reviews, the customer raised the concern that the team that works with remote peers is very frustrated. So the things we heard included that the remote team is not proactive, that they spend time on fixing things that actually are obsolete in the functionality. That's why the client's team also questioned whether our team actually understands the product and all the modules. They were also surprised that no questions popped up on the daily stand-up. The bottom line, the frustration and the customer satisfaction level pretty low. It is also worth mentioning that there were recent organizational changes in both companies. So the teams that were working together, they basically just met. And obviously they started on the wrong foot. Management on both sides lacked visibility of the team performance, so we needed to do something. I and my team spent some time talking to the teams on both shores, even like on 3 shores, and here is what we learned. Well, after restructuring, remote teams started working on cross-functional development with much more integration between different organizational units. New geographies made this process even more complicated. The work often relied on reaching to the stakeholders outside the project team. So the success depended obviously on knowing internal network and on the communication skills of the requester. And another funny thing turned out is that we learned that the lack of proactiveness concerns popped up in the management meetings only and were not shared with the team. So the engineers simply didn't know that their peers are actually interested in their ideas and thoughts outside the existing backlog. This is the high-level list of actions that we took to improve overall climate in the project. First of all, we captured the expectations from the clients on team goals, performance, and got their vision on overall product and project strategies. It came together with the training on cultural differences because definitions of proactive and high quality and in time were different between different locations. Another thing is that we fixed with cultural training is, for example, that complaints that Eastern European colleagues didn't ask questions in the meetings. It actually has the cultural difference as a primary reason. Eastern Europeans tend to figure out things on their own and ask questions only when they are truly stuck. Another thing that we did, we also had to reset the governance structure after the organizational changes to establish the clear communication flows on all levels. We also put together on-site trip schedule to give teams a chance to get to know each other in person and visit facilities in other countries. And of course, we enhanced regular communication, such as daily stand-ups and regular status meetings with video conferencing, and added a Scrum of Scrum meeting to the list to give remote team an understanding of how their work actually fits in the strategic roadmap and corporate environment. I would say that these basic steps not only improved performance visibility and productivity, but also had a giant impact on team morale in all locations. So it actually proves the point once again that it all human being and nature that can make miracles, I would say. Just because being respectful and open to each other is the most solid foundation for the long-term relationships in both personal life and business. And there is no need to wait until a quarterly business review meeting if you feel some tension in the relationship now. Just talk to your partner, ask questions, be ready to answer their questions, simply communicate. Well, and this is the last slide of this webinar, just because to summarize things I said, Henry Ford said it's the best. So coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. And when you factor the power of culture and people in your partnership, you actually fast-track this process. So that is it. And I hope you were able to capture the major messages of my topic, is that once the relationships are built, you're pretty much in a safe place with outsourcing. And I'm ready for the questions.
Great. Thanks a lot, Halyna, for your awesome presentation. I think lots of people should be inspired by it. Here's a question we received through the email. Which cultural differences work toward outsourcing development?
Well, yeah, cultural difference, as I told, can be a totally different topic for another webinar. We should for sure add it to the schedule. And as any difference and as any diversity, it creates this creative climate in the collaboration. For example, the cultural difference that some of you may have experienced with working with Eastern European cultures like Russians or Ukrainians, we tend to be rather negative. So it's common for us to state the sentence with no but or things like that. But if you actually have the person like this on your cross-cultural team, it's very good to have the devil's advocate once in a while who will be able to bring some reasonable, maybe a slightly pessimistic view to the table, but will definitely not hide anything and will share all, even the worst prognosis. So I would say this is an interesting cultural difference that adds to the outsourcing landscape.
Good, thank you, Halyna. And here is another question. What is the nearest future for software development outsourcing? Can you predict anything?
Yeah, I wish we could have predicted anything. But for sure, based on what we see how the business develops, we are going to very, I would say, melted world. So when, as I was saying, those borders and distinction between what the company does inside and for what the company actually needs extra vendors, those borders are blending and they become less and less distinct. So I believe that in future, even the word outsourcing will be slightly outdated just because it won't be about outsourcing. It will be more about just working together. So probably we'll see some prefix into that, maybe co-sourcing or something, and definitely co-creative.
Good. And so here's the last question for today, I think. So did you, Halyna, have any negative experience in delivering outsourcing services? And what was the reason for this?
Oh, yes. For 10 years, you definitely have like 50-50 experience or so. There were stories to share, and on both ends, again, when you're a client, you tend to forget how does it feel to work on the partner side, and the same once you turn to the supplier side, it's less and less easy to stand in the client's shoes. So yes, there were different stories, and one of the case studies that I actually shared, and it was one of the recent, but the things turned out well there. About the projects where it didn't work out that well, there was one project a few years ago where we actually followed the client leads too much, I would say. So we were performing and working as those executors just because there were such initial expectations, and the project didn't go that well. And I thought we right now, especially after retrospective we held on our end, I truly believe that we should have spoken, even though the client was not ready to listen to our suggestions. We should have spoken louder, maybe, and voicing our concerns, not just follow their lead. So this again brings us to this topic and to the discussion, is that there are always truth on both ends of and both sides of the collaboration. That's why there should be someone with a common sense and right attitude to facilitate this open discussion. Because if the supplier treats the customer as in those, like, client is always right and follows their lead, there are some not that good outcomes. And vice versa, when the client is disrespectful to the supplier in any way, it can also lead to a failure. So we should be open and honest in those discussions what success means to the project for both sides.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Halyna. That's a very good point made at the very end. So thank you